U.S. President Donald Trump has labeled a Russian nationalist group as a terrorist organization.
The announcement marks the first time the U.S. government has applied the label to a white supremacist group.
These actions are unprecedented, said Nathan Sales, Assistant Secretary of State for Counterterrorism on Monday.
The Russian imperialist movement is believed to have offered military training to neo-Nazi fighters and aided election interference in the U.S.
The group is also thought to have been involved in neo-Nazi bombings at several locations in Sweden in 2016 and 2017.
The designation has been seen as an unusual move, as President Trump has previously been criticized for failure to do more about the threat of white supremacy.
The terror designation gives the U.S. government authority to block Americans from providing material support or engage in financial dealings with such groups.
To receive such a designation, a group must be a foreign organization and must engage in terrorist activity that threatens the security of U.S. nationals or the national security of the U.S.
The Treasury Department can block any American assets belonging to a named terrorist group, and its members can be prevented from entering the U.S.
The label has been most frequently used for Islamist extremist groups.
The Russian Imperial Movement is an ultra-nationalist paramilitary group based in St. Petersburg, where it has a training camp, with alleged links to white supremacist organizations in the West.
According to Swedish investigators, the group trained 2 of the 3 Swedish men convicted of bombings targeting a cafe and refugee centers in 2016, and a synagogue the following year.
The group is not believed to be state-sponsored, but Russian President Vladimir Putin has tolerated its activities, The New York Times reports. It supported the Kremlin after the 2014 annexation of Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula by recruiting fighters for the conflict.
The U.S. is also labeling 3 of the group's leaders as individual terrorists who will face separate sanctions.
This is the first time the United States has ever designated white supremacists as terrorists, and this illustrates how seriously this administration takes the white supremacist terrorist threat, Mr. Sales said. We are doing things no previous administration has done to counter this threat.
The designation of the Russian imperial movement as a terrorist organization suggests the Trump administration is becoming increasingly concerned about a global threat from white supremacist movements.
The U.S. has a long history of dealing with homegrown white nationalists and supremacists, including the Ku Klux Klan and the group behind the violent 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Members of a Michigan-based extremist militia group staged the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168, as well.
Now, however, the U.S. is considering similar or even greater dangers sponsored or instigated from abroad, which could be a destabilizing force not just in the U.S. but among its allies, as well. Far-right extremism appears to have inspired the 2019 Christchurch shooting at a mosque in New Zealand and attacks in Scandinavia.
The White House move also represents a change of tone, given that Donald Trump last March said he thought white nationalist violence was the action of a small group of people and not a rising global threat.
As is often the case these past few years, the test will now be whether the president echoes the concerns of his administration officials, or contradicts them.
Last year, under a separate authority, Mr. Trump designated Iran's Elite Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) as a foreign terrorist organization, the first time the U.S. had declared another nation's military a terrorist entity.
The president has faced criticism for minimizing the threat of white nationalist violence in the U.S., especially compared to other terror groups. He was widely condemned for his reaction to the deadly white supremacist rally in Virginia, and his comments suggesting there were very fine people on both sides.
This past summer, the U.S. faced a wave of mass violence and attempted attacks, many of them targeting specific minority groups. The government lacks any federal penalties for acts of domestic terrorism, however, like those that exist for international acts of terror.